folks, it's your girl, Lexi Mahari, and in this episode of Buzzworthy Chit Chat, we are going to be talking about Bel-Air. That is the new Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reboot that is now streaming on the Peacock Network. It started last night, February 13th, and what we know so far is that we've got a good 10 episodes coming. So let's dive in. But before we do, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can be notified each time I upload a brand new video. Apparently, this reboot is occurring because of a viral self-made trailer that came out on YouTube in 2019. Someone put out a short film project that flipped the script on, what Fresh Prince of Bel-Air would look like if it had been more of a dramatic story. And Will Smith apparently caught wind of it and pitched it and took it back. And so we are going to get a limited series, I guess, maybe unless something happens and it gets renewed, on the Peacock Network, in which we'll get to see more of a dramatic take on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You might recall that the main character, Will Smith, moved from Philadelphia to Bel-Air to escape his neighborhood because it was no longer safe for him. He was getting in clashes with the local teens. So his mother sent him out west to live with his aunt and uncle and his cousins in this posh area of Bel-Air where homes are luxurious and opulent. We're talking mansions, and they are behind these gated communities. Now, the Peacock Network did drop the first 3 episodes, and I was binge watching like I don't know what. I couldn't stop watching. That's how good it was. I didn't even feel like I watched 3 episodes, and I am looking forward to actually seeing the next episode. So I will actually just kind of start with the first episode to give you a sense of what to expect if you do not have access to the Peacock Network, or maybe you were on the fence about whether or not it was going to be a worthy investment. So it is an amazing modern twist on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It, as I've identified, follows the basic framework of the original storyline, in which Will is sent out west to live with his aunt and uncle after getting into a heated exchange with the local teens. Will is subsequently put in jail, and as a result, you can see that his future is looking dimmer and dimmer, whether he ends up in juvie or some type of prison system, or he just gets flat out killed on the streets. His life basically is under threat, and so he has to hightail it out west. His mother actually sends him out west to save his life and to spare his life, in a nutshell. So we get to observe the backstory in the first episode. We get to see who Will was in Philadelphia. We get to understand and experience life with just him and his mother. We get to know who his friend was. If you are someone who watched the original sitcom series itself, then you might recall his friend Trey, who came out to see him, who was portrayed by Don Cheadle back in the day. We get to see Trey and who Trey was, and his relationship with Will. And it's kind of interesting, if you remember that story between Trey and Will Smith. You kind of thought it was going to be more, or at least I thought it was going to be more of a protective type of friendship role of this individual. But that's not really how it comes across. He just comes across as being his friend. But anywho, his teenage friend. But, you'll get to see all of that. You get to see that backstory there. You get to see that Will Smith was this superstar basketball player back in Philadelphia. And so you'll get to observe that in action as well. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you get to follow his journey out to the West Coast, where, he clearly has to deal with the fact that he is leaving home, right? And he is not going to be able to go back there for a while. And so we get to observe, the famous drive that we see in the opening credits of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but from a different perspective. His friend, the person he meets, is actually Jazz, and Jazz ends up being the perhaps what Uber driver who transports him from the airport to the mansion. And the mansion is truly a mansion. Not to say that back in the 90s, the Banks's home was not mansion like, because for that time, sure, it looked like a mansion. But, in 2020, 2021, 2022, we get to see, those mansions and exactly, how well the Banks are living. And so, who is there at the mansion? Who from the original cast? So we definitely still have, Phil Banks, who is in hot pursuit of, obtaining a position as a district attorney. He is campaigning hard. We are, seeing this man who is obviously in the prime of his career. And one of the things that I noticed that they are emphasizing in this episode and throughout the other two episodes is the thing that they only lightly touched on in the series. And that is, how in touch is Philip Banks with his blackness, basically, and where he came from. There's a couple of scenes in which, if you go back to the original series, Will challenges his uncle on how in touch he is. He obviously did it a lot with Carlton, but there are a couple of scenes in which early on in the series, he challenges his uncle about how in touch he is with his, where he came from. And so to me, we get to see that part of Philip Banks play out a lot in the initial episodes as it relates to, him being questioned about his wealth and, challenged in indirect ways and direct ways with who he is, where he's come from, how in touch he is with the Black people, with Black Lives Matter. There's one point, particularly in the episode, where someone calls up to a radio show where he is, being interviewed and challenges him to say Black Lives Matter. So, that's the piece that I think they're focusing on heavily with Philip Banks is, as he goes down this road and he's promising that as a DA, he is going to attempt to hold the system accountable in dealing with Black men. He is being challenged on his Blackness. So next we have Aunt Viv, who to me is very much patterned after the original character who portrayed Aunt Viv, and that being Janet Hubert. And this actress, I think, does a great job. Obviously I think they all studied the characters well, and I do feel like she is patterning herself after the original Aunt Viv character, or let's say she's emulating the original Aunt Viv that was portrayed by Janet Hubert. As opposed to her, however, having this initial dream to be a dancer, this Aunt Viv is someone who actually had dreams of becoming an artist as opposed to dancing. So I thought that was an interesting twist on things. Again, I think it just kind of modernizes it somewhat. Not to say that she couldn't have been a dancer type. Dance was big back in the 90s as well. I mean, dance is big today, but I'm just saying for those of you who came along in the 90s who know that, we had the videos and the video vixens and all that kind of stuff, and or just, natural artful dancers and ballet. She could have easily still done that, but I thought it was an interesting twist that they, made her instead someone who wanted to be an artist. However, she is still a professor who teaches at a university. And so that is brought up. That is the thing that has carried over from the, the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The relationship with her sister, Will's mother, clearly, that is still a strong relationship that's in place. And then I think her strength in how she manages or handles her husband, we're probably going to get to see more of that as the series unfolds. There have been some, I think things that have been alluded to in the initial 3 episodes about, Phil and or her strong personality and just in general how she handles things. Again, I felt very much in line with the original Vivian Banks of the original series. So we get to see that she and Hillary have a That to me is like a typical mother-daughter relationship. She is trying to steer Hillary's life in a direction that Hillary does not necessarily want it to go, and these two pretty much clash on what it is they both think Hillary should be doing at this stage with her life. And so I think this is Vivian's character flaw, because what we observe is kind of the I don't want to call it the old way of thinking, right? I think it's more of the practical way of thinking that many of us were raised to have, right? That you set your focus on a job or a career that is going to generate income and keep you well. And, hopefully maybe you can even turn it into a wealth of sorts versus, what many folks are able to achieve today on YouTube. That is, very much different than the way many of us were raised. This thought around leveraging sources like YouTube and Instagram to lead to your financial stability is just a foreign thing for people who maybe came up in the 80s or even the 90s to some extent. We were brought up thinking that you had to have this full-time job, 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, and or you had to have some source of steady income. Yes, you could have a dream to be an artist, but you couldn't necessarily look to that to sustain you, which I think today it may be a little bit different the way folks think as it relates to how they can live their lives and or sustain themselves. And so it kind of becomes like Vivian's character flaw. As I've already hinted, we know what Will's character flaw is based on what we see happens to him in Philadelphia and some other things that you'll see in the course of the series. We know that Phil's flaw potentially is whether or not he is in touch with his his black community and his blackness. And for Vivian, it's going to be her view of the world. And then we have Hillary, who, is very different than I think the character we saw on the series in the 90s. I don't know, maybe we'll see more as time goes on. But this Hillary, she's obviously a little more intelligent than the Hillary Banks that we observed in the 90s. She seems to actually be focused, despite what her mother says, on, what her dreams are. I think she actually does know what she wants to achieve. It's just how does she get there, with her mother having so much to say about it. So, this Hillary is someone who is in pursuit of, not only is she an influencer, but apparently she is also someone who's very interested in the culinary arts. And so I think that's the tie back to the original, right? I do believe Hillary at one point was a caterer on the original series. And so I think this is where we're seeing the Hillary Banks character go, at least in these initial episodes. There are some things that come out, I think, in the preview for what's to come. So I don't know how far she's going to get down that path if she doesn't follow her mother's path. But this is what we see with Hillary. Next, we have Carlton. The Carlton Banks character is a lot to deal with. I mean, it's like if you turned Carlton dark in the 90s. Like, he has a very dark side to him, unfortunately, in this reboot. I have mixed feelings about it, honestly. I think, yes, they did carry over again, being in touch with the perception of whether or not he's in touch with his blackness. They addressed some real, I think, social controversial issues head on, such as, people using the N-word from another race, whether or not that's acceptable, even if you're just singing along to a song. That was a very interesting scene in this. It was either I believe it was the initial episode 1. So forgive me if I'm confusing episode 1 with episode 2. But that is one of the things that happens in the scene, in one of the scenes. And so we see that, yes, Carlton has a very strong presence at his school. Again, very similar to what we knew about in the initial episodes of the original Fresh Prince. And so Will definitely struggles to understand his cousin and how it is he maneuvers in this life. We also and this is a spoiler alert, we find that Carlton has a drug problem, apparently. Now, you all know that, unfortunately, or I won't say unfortunately, but the reality is that was very out of character for the original Carlton. Yes, there was the one episode where he got into some pills that Will had, and, he got really high until he passed out. But I feel like what we're seeing in the reboot is obviously way out of character of the original Carlton. But, perhaps that's how they add a layer to Carlton's character. I just have mixed emotions about it because I don't know. I think maybe I wanted to see Carlton maintain his view on things and how he moved, right? Because Carlton actually was a very driven character at the end of the day. Say what you will about him. So, anywho, I don't know. We'll see how I feel about that as time goes on. Um, so, yeah, Carlton gives Will a hard time. They clash, and there does not seem to be any level of compromise for these two. And there's a good reason for that. I think, Carlton has to watch Will come in and, basically gains the attention of his parents. And this definitely falls in line with the original series, right? Where Carlton did struggle sometimes with having to watch his father seemingly have more interest in Will at times than maybe he did in Carlton. And it's just that, he identifies with Will a little bit more in some things, right? And that comes through in the episodes. I won't reveal too much, but yeah, I think that comes through in some aspects of the original episodes for the new series. Um, the other character, before we get to Ashley and Jeffrey, that is introduced in the series, which does become a point of contention for Carlton and Will, is the Lisa character, who you might recall was portrayed by Nia Long. I feel like they have kind of merged or meshed her and the Jackie character together, some aspects of that. And you guys, if you happen to still be watching this video, let me know in the comments. But I don't believe Lisa and Carlton had a relationship. I know they knew each other. In the original series, the gag was that Carlton played a prank on Will, and Lisa, as a part of her sorority pledge, actually had tied up Will and was, trying to do what she needed to do to pledge to this sorority. And so that was Carlton kind of led to that happening. He made that happen for her. But it did not appear that they had a pre-existing relationship. I thought it was Jackie that he was trying to go out with, and then Will shows up, and it turns out Jackie and Will have this pre-existing relationship, and, Carlton is just done, right? So anyway, just probably TMI, but that's what we see here with Lisa, that Lisa and Carlton apparently had this pre-existing relationship. It didn't work out due to some issues on Carlton's part that you'll see when you watch. And so, now she takes an instant liking to Will, and it becomes kind of one of those conflicts between the three that ensues early on initially. And so, yeah, it's really ugly between Carlton and Will initially in the series. And you'll see that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm feeling how they're portraying Carlton just yet, but I know every show needs a villain of sorts. So we'll see how all of this plays out. Ashley, as I alluded to, is back. So far, her role has been very small, but she gets some good one-liners in. Particularly when it comes to the arguments, I would say, between Hillary and her mother. Also, as I've mentioned, Jeffrey is a part of the series, but they've given us a younger Jeffrey. He does have the English accent. This Jeffrey is not a butler, but he is a house manager. So this is going to be interesting to see what else is going on with Jeffrey. I feel like Jeffrey has another layer that we don't know about. And I'm wondering if it's going to come into play perhaps when and if Will's past catches up with him from Philadelphia, because there are some scenes that are going to lead you to believe that, his problems aren't going to stay in Philadelphia, but they may actually get on a plane and come find him. So, yeah, I'm sorry this is so long, but I just really wanted to talk about this show. This is part of the reason I started a YouTube channel. I wanted to be able to come on here and talk about things that unfortunately, nobody else is talking about just yet, at least within my friend circle, I should say. I would definitely recommend you watch this series. It's really good. I think it's worth the money. I'm a little frustrated. I hate that they don't just drop all the episodes, but we know why they're doing that, right? These streaming networks that choose not to drop their all of the series, they're doing it because they want you to keep paying money every month or for as long as they can get you versus drop the series. If your content is good, it's good, and people are going to keep their subscription plan. So I'm a little frustrated with that. So it's not too bad. I think I'm paying $4 and something a month, but I definitely recommend it. I think it's worth signing up for it, at least to catch this series. Looks like there's going to be some other good stuff on the network, so that's why I'm like, I don't know why they're piecemealing it out to us. Just drop the freaking series and let us binge watch the 10 episodes. But yeah, I recommend you check it out. Give your money for a little while, donate to the cause, or you know what, you can wait until all 10 episodes are out there and then come on and binge watch in probably another 2 months. You'll be able to go in there and just binge watch everything. But that's my feedback at this time, and with that, I'm going to end this review. But before you go, if you haven't already done so, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next video. Stay safe.